Hello, Mohammed. Are you okay? Mohammed, oh, yeah. Okay, wonderful, Mohammed. You okay?
Yes, I'm very well, alhamdulillah. I hope you are all well too.
Okay, good. I can't hear you that well, Mohammed. You know, the sound quality is not great today.
Okay, let me check from my side the settings.
It's
I
probably
mean,
the TV in the background.
or maybe it's the TV in the background. Yes, as Allah says. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a TV on in the background?
No, we don't have a TV right now.
Okay. Hold on a
My
second.
father just watching the news using his mobile. Just a few seconds.
Yeah, yeah. Your father's just watching the news. Okay, so Mohammed, you know everyone on this call apart from Nazreen. So Nazreen, I think Mohammed can still hear you. So if you could please introduce yourself to Allah and to Emma and Mohammed who don't know you.
Okay.
Welcome back, Yazan.
Welcome. Hello, how are you, everyone? It's nice to meet you
Yeah.
again.
Yes, very good to see you. And so Yazan, I think it's just Nazreen that you haven't met previously. She was just saying that she's also in Birmingham like myself and like Allah as well. Allah's very close to Birmingham as well. And Chris, there's quite a lot of us Brummies here, aren't there, today?
Yeah, I'm good. It's okay, I'm fine.
You know, it's little things like we just made an assumption that the sound at the background was a TV and things like that. It just kind of jerks you back into reality, because things that we take for granted here, they're no longer things that people like Mohammed can take for granted in Gaza. So apologies for that, Mohammed. It's you know, because a TV seems like a luxury now, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, you know, just to start the call off, you know, the purpose of this call is to build bridges through relationships. We're all in different spaces in terms of location. We're also in different spaces in terms of, you know, where we're positioned. Some of us are in academia, and some of us are aspiring academics, and others are in private organizations. So in terms of our location, the location is not simply the demographic physical location, but also the location in terms of our positionality, because we have to acknowledge the fact that a lot of people, especially those in academia, they want to join in the conversation, but they are reluctant to do so because there is, you know, in terms of being visible in engaging in conversations like this, even though we're talking about creativity, we're talking about productivity, we're talking about, you know, goodwill created through building bridges, even that is something that some academics will feel, well, I need to think twice about it. And that in itself is one of the reasons that we need to have these conversations. That in itself is a cause for concern. So, you know, those of us who are on the call, obviously we feel empathy. We know that, you know, we know what's going on, and we don't need to be convinced about it. We don't need to be persuaded that what we believe is accurate. And so that's the purpose. It's to build bridges, to build a community, because we know that through building communities there is power. Things emerge through community building. And so in that respect, Yazan, tell us how you have progressed in terms of your project, in terms of the creativity that you are working with, in terms of your own community building.
Yes, okay. So first thing first, I was working through this project here in Egypt. I started to ask about factories just to like make progress in this project. So I met a lot of people like recently. There are creative people through my foundation that I work with. So these people are also creative, and they are from Gaza also. They have evacuated through the war. So it was a great chance to meet such creative people, to just share thoughts and share ideas. So a lot of them, they have similar ideas, or they have done something like this, or some brands. So I was talking to them and gain from their experiences. So these days I'm starting to just contact factories about this project. So about the idea itself, maybe not all of us know about the idea. So it's about Phoenix rising. So the Phoenix is a symbol of Gaza because it raised itself from death. So this project is mainly based on this idea, that us as Gazans or people from Gaza, they built themselves from death, we can say. As I evacuated from Gaza and met a lot of people here in Egypt, they have evacuated and they are in the same condition. So all of them are creative. So connecting to making value and just talking about creativity, this thing like matches the idea and the concept of creativity and making communities. So it was like a great chance to meet people here from my own country, from my own city, and they are also creative and they have similar ideas. So we are working together to just enhance our ideas and to get a real step in this project.
Okay, wonderful. So Chris, in terms of, we're both public speakers. We, that's how our communities like speaking in public. So based on what we're working on here, for you, what is the difference between speaking in public and speaking in private?
Well, when you're speaking in public, the main thing is that you want to communicate with as large an audience as possible. So you use various tricks, I think you could call them, which the other people call them rhetorical devices, where I think it probably exists in all languages, but there are various ways in which you can turn your language round so that it makes it more acceptable to the people you're talking to. So you speak to the room, you speak to what the interests of the people there, but there has to be a certain amount of generality to it, so that you're talking to the common denominators that we all share. But in private conversations, you can be more intimate. You can know the person you're talking to and shape your message to them. And also it's a two-way traffic in that in public speaking, you've got to assume the answers or the questions that people want answered. Whereas when you're with somebody else, you share a conversation and it's a two-way process. So that there are lots of subtle differences and you can only, if you want to speak in public, you can only do it by doing it and learning by your mistakes, and also just copying, as we all do as human beings, the people who are good at it.
And there's a certain amount of courage that is required to speak in public compared with when we're having private conversations, because this is why, there's lots of research done on this, that people are very afraid of speaking in public, even about topics which are not controversial. They're afraid to step up and speak in class, for example. Even Ala, like when you are in class, there are some people who are very articulate, but they don't want to speak up. So for you, Ala, for you, why is it important to speak in public to raise awareness rather than having private conversations? Yeah, you're on mute, Ala.
I think if you I'm thinking back to the conversation that we had a couple of weeks ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago, the first call that I joined, where we were speaking about, trying to increase the size of the community to try and solve a problem. And I think if discussions are had only in private, you kind of restrict the speed at which you can actually grow that community. You're kind of falling back to only direct conversations and then maybe limited word of mouth spreading of the word that you're trying to share with people. Whereas if you kind of go public, you are speaking to a much broader audience. you're speaking to a lot more people, and you kind of get your message out there a lot quicker. So I think that's what I'd say about that.
Yeah, it's about amplification, isn't it? Because this is the reason that we meet. We meet to raise awareness, and I don't see how we can raise awareness through private conversations.
I think it's a lot slower, for sure. If you try to do it via private conversations, you're going to have you still raise awareness. Maybe it's like, I guess it really depends on the context. For example, if you're trying to solve a problem, let me think, on the political scale, for example. So, you may go to local communities and you can speak to hundreds of people, and you may not actually make a difference to that problem. You may not actually come to a solution. But if you had a private conversation with a government member or an MP, for example, it's a private conversation, but it might get you towards a solution a bit quicker than speaking to a larger community. So it really depends on the context, in my opinion. But yeah.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you. Yes, it does depend on the context. Go ahead, Chris.
Just Ala raises a good point about transparency as well. There has to come a point where you're not having private conversations away from people in a sort of conspiratorial way. It's also, if you're going to have any kind of democratic accountability, then you have to be transparent in your communications as well.
That's right. The transparency, the courage, the transparency. And also, Yazan, a few weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago, we talked about, what you're creating in terms of the community that you're building for Phoenix Rising. Is it going to be a closed community, or is it going to be an open community? Because that's a decision to make. Because if this was a closed group, we would have like 12 people, and we would say only these 12 people or 6 people, or whatever number we chose. It's a closed group, and we meet every week. It's only those people who have formed the group, but then that lack of openness would mean that we become very inward looking rather than outward looking. And, and there is a time and place for a closed group as well. Like if you're setting up a business, like for example, Yazan, like the Phoenix Rising, the actual concept, you do need a small closed group to think about the design ideas and to think about how you're going to market it. So for something specific like that, there would be a time and place to have 3 or 4 people, or maybe 5 people. But for something like this, which is about community building, where there is that need for openness, isn't there, Yazan?
Yeah, actually, for me, like I prefer it to be like an open thing. It's for me, everyone is welcome. Because we are raising awareness, we're just talking, we are creating communities. So communities should welcome anybody like wants to know more or wanting to or willing to get more knowledge. So we welcome everyone. For me, like Phoenix Rising is a concept, and we have to share it with others. We have to talk about this thing. Everyone has ideas. We can add ideas to each other. We can share experience. But absolutely, like talking about Phoenix Rising as a brand, of course, it will be like it will have like a smaller group as an administration for technical things, we can say. But of course, it's a bigger idea. It aims, or it like the aimed group or the aimed audience are way more than this. So for me, I'm working on raising awareness, even though like in personal efforts. Like anybody I meet here in Egypt, either he's Palestinian, Egyptian, or from the Western world, I just talk to them about the same concept. So it's not like it's not connected to a specific thing. It's something in general. So everybody is welcome to know about it. Like we can say, it's our duty, especially me and Muhammad, because we are from Gaza. So we can talk about this thing. Another thing that, okay, I live in Egypt, so but that is not for long. Maybe 2 months, 3 months, maybe I can leave or get back to Gaza. No one knows what is the future, because we are here just as displaced people. So for me, the community should not be connected to a specific place or a specific people. It's like something in general. We can I can take this community from Egypt to any place I can go to. So it's a concept we carry everywhere we go and anytime we go.
Wonderful, Yazan, because, you know, last week I was in Germany and I was just talking to Ala earlier on, because about 10, 15 years ago, was it in 2010 perhaps, we went to Windsor to work with horses, because we use horses as part of equine assisted education. And where I was in Germany, it was a couple of people there, Ala knows as well, and we're a community of teachers, educators who are interested in working with horses as part of the way we educate. And that community started with, like this one, started with 4 or 5 people: David, Sharon, Gerard and Karen, who are from Germany. They met in California. And they were just talking, because it was the 20th year anniversary of that community this year, this annual conference. And they were just talking about how they, you know, that Karen and Gerard went from Germany and David and Sharon went from England, and they met a couple of other people there in California at this conference, and they created this community around this concept of using horses in education. And now, like, sometimes we meet in Poland, sometimes we meet in different places around the world, and you know, so like you say, Yazan, that community is not kind of anchored to a physical place, because there are about 300 coaches from around the world as part of that community. And the important thing to say about that community is that it has thrived over the last 20 years through deep relationships, you know, through the friendships, because otherwise, without the friendships, we're all in different organizations, different locations and whatever. Why would we keep on meeting after 20 years? And so from 4 people, you know, now over 300 people around the world, you know, this started with myself and Mohammed, a conversation, then Yazan, and that, you know, now there's about 12 people. These are early days, you know. Hopefully these conversations will be life lasting. I don't think life lasting is a word, Chris, is it? Life lasting, but you know what I mean.
Long.
Yeah. Lifelong, you know. Yeah, that's correct. Yes. So hopefully these friendships will be lifelong, and things will emerge through the relationships and the bridges that we form from that. So Nazreen, let me bring you in now. So working in academia, why do you think for you it's important to make yourself present, you know, have the courage to take a stand and to be part of this conversation? You know, maybe later today or sometime in the future and whatever. So that was great. It was great that you were able to recommend it to somebody else as well.
I think, yeah, obviously there's a lot for me to learn, and I've learned, like I said last time, I've learned a lot already in this short amount of time. And I think there's a lot of powerful stories here. And I probably won't, so I didn't say probably the right way last time. I gave an example of being in a supermarket, and I think of someone behind me shouting at me because he was in a rush. And I think the message, what I was trying to get across was, it's very hard to get people's time and effort in conversations. Like, you have to, you know, there's like an apathy around, and I think it's a society thing, not just in academia. People just trying to get through the day-to-day life, and if you told them, oh, I'm dying, you know, it's almost like, oh yeah, I've got to feed the cat in an hour, you know. There's this kind of apathy, and I think you've got to get so creativity is great, because I mean, I've done a whole my PhD is about disability and chronic illness, but it's a practice-based PhD about digital media and journalism and how to bring creativity into it. But I'm also a big believer in having a purpose and using media, using creativity to get a purpose across. And I think, you know, I am more drawn to the self-publishing routes nowadays because of the censorship issues and stuff like that. But I'm also a great believer in mainstream media. And I think there's a lot of stories what would be great in the mainstream media, you know. I was watching one video the other week on Al Jazeera's. I think they've done quite good coverage. And there was a little girl, and she was in, you know, Gaza, and really showing what it was like. And I just think there's, you know, last week someone was saying about that, you know, you don't want pity, and there is a big difference between pity and empathy. And I get that, because in disability, there's a big disability activist called Barbara Lischke, and in the 90s she'd done this big campaign, and it was called Piss on Pity. It was a great campaign, and it was about on how, you know, forget pity, you know, let's bring the empathy. But I think also, like, we're at a stage in society where any feeling is good, to get in touch with any feeling, even if it is a bit pity to start with, and then the empathy. And I think there's great stories, because there's a lot what I've learned, like when I think, like, Yazan, you were saying about how you got creative with the cigarette making, because you don't have the resources. And I think that's a great story in itself. And I think, and Mohammed, don't you do website design and stuff like that? So could there be a scope for, Mohammed, you making a website of this and doing different narrative stories, like the cigarette story as one story? And like, there was a story last week, a lady came who was helping out in Egypt with you, Yazan, and giving out food parcels. And a lot of people don't know about the role Egypt is having in this, and the basic things like food and stuff like that. I mean, and getting the empathy going. So you've got to make the heartstrings go of the audience, of the readers, almost like going in, interviewing someone, going to a food bank in Egypt, you know, interviewing a family, recording that, you know, doing a spread or something like that. I think there's a lot of scope.
Yes, there is. And so these stories, the purpose of the stories is so that people become human beings, because otherwise it's just statistics. Everyone, you know, hears about the statistics. Oh, now it's like 50,000, 60,000. It's like, well, each one of those thousands, everyone is a story in themselves. I mean, Mohammed is a website designer, and I am his client. That's how this started. So I met Mohammed I think it's about 3 years ago, and so this is a story that began with a client in a web designer relationship. You know, that is a relationship. And so without that, there wouldn't be this, you know. So that's the point. The point is that things emerge out of those kind of meaningful connections, those kind of those strong relationships. So I'll bring you in now. So we've talked a lot about the empathy and humanization and, you know, all of that. And so for you, obviously, we're all here because we do feel the empathy. That's one of the things. But when I was teaching your class about business, I do remember always talking about the importance of trust and how you have to create trust, because, and I was always kind of like lecturing about trust when people would come to the lesson late, and that was never Allah. Allah was always very punctual, a star student, but there were some students who would always come late, and I'd always be saying to them, well, if you're always late, people are not going to trust you, because you can't be relied on. You won't be there when it really counts. And so for you, Allah, what, tell us about trust, and tell us about the importance of empathy, and tell us about, how that is important in any organizational success.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Yeah, I think trust, and the example that you gave is a big thing. I think, in the example that you gave, which is, coming late to class, or, coming late to a meeting, it's, yes, it is, a lack. You're going to have a lack of trust in the person that's late, but it shows a lack of respect as well, from the person that, is that person's not really respecting your time, and, the time that you've kind of assigned to whatever meeting or whatever chat you guys were going to have. And I think, I think that's definitely one of the biggest things that I learned from you as a teacher and as a lecturer, and that's, first of all, to have respect for other people's time, and I think just having that kind of mentality towards interactions with people is something that will just grow trust naturally. I think when people start to see that you have respect for their time, for for their skills, their capabilities, and whatever kind of interaction you're having, it just kind of naturally grows a trust that you have between yourselves. And I can definitely speak a lot more about how important trust is in an organizational setting, and a professional setting, and personal settings as well. But I think like it's really important. Like trust is built. I think trust is built upon respect, and I think if you can really try to get the respect done right, then the trust will follow naturally.
And that's what it was with Mohammed. Like when he was working on my website, I trusted him to do what I wanted him to do. Like, I'd give the instructions, and there was like total reliability and trust, and also going the extra mile, because I think that's what I was always saying to your class as well. It's like you always have to give a bit more than is expected of you. If you always give a bit more than what is expected of you, it's like you're investing, that extra bit more is that investment. It's like people like you because they know you're just not going to kind of like give them in business, that you're not just going to give them the bare. That's what makes the difference between outstanding and good. You might have a good service, but an outstanding service is that waiter or the waitress in the restaurant who treats you a little, they go that extra mile. They might give you a little sweet at the end, or what's the point of giving that sweet at the end? It's just that little extra that you haven't paid for. So Christians, go ahead, Allah.
Sorry, I was just going to elaborate. Like, that's another good example where the waiter might give you a little bit extra. You might, and I think, kind of throwing back to the stuff I was talking about, respect, is that if you as a person are respectful to other people, or are respectful to that waiter, you're already starting that relationship in a good sense. So that waiter is going to trust you to be a respectful person to them, to to their time, to their job, and then it kind of like I was trying to say, like the respect brings the trust, and the trust gives you this extra. I'm not too sure what the word is, but it kind of gives you this extra level of interaction with people, if I can say that. But I'll leave it there.
That's what creates the loyalty, because the reason they give you that little sweet or the little chocolate is like that little bit extra, because then you come back. You come back. So Yazin, you're in the early stages of creating this concept, and like you have to build a lot of trust with the people that you want to be working with. So how do you do that? How do you create trust and loyalty?
Okay, as you said, like relationships is so important, like between any two two things, like a seller and a customer, a client and you can say web designer. It should be a relationship, and a good relationship, because to build just trust between these two things. So of course, like creating value or giving the customer value will give him this trust he will need to just get back to us and to connect. And like we can say, the value is in the quality and the we can say being polite, as Ala said. And we can say also like giving a value like through the concept. Not only because we sell like product, we can make it like a concept. We are like a family, we're like friends. So we can make it like more friendly than it's a concept or a relationship between a brand and a customer. So for me, or I think, in my opinion, that's the best way to just to do this, is to create community and to make this community loyal to that idea, because or to make them belong to this idea throughout the treatment, throughout the value we can give them.
Okay, thank you, Yazan. Mohammed, are you still there? Because your microphone is off and you're...
Yes, I'm with you, but I'm just turn off the camera because the internet's not that.
Because Mohammed, was it about 3 years ago that we, like, I first became your client for your web design work? Was that about 3 years ago?
It's almost 3 years. As I remember, it was in the Corona or before the Corona a little bit.
I think it was definitely before Corona though. And and I also met your mother, you know, and I had some conversations with your mother online as well. So you see, that creates, it's like, it becomes like a family relationship, you know. So it's not just a client designer relationship. It's like, then I met his mother, had some lots of conversations with his mother online as well. And so you see, that's how it develops, you know, those relationships develop with you entering that kind of space, which is not simply a contractual space. It's not just simply like, oh, I pay you to put this on my website, and it's like, that's it. It's like you become a human being for each other. So Chris, you work a lot in communities, and so tell us about trust, and tell us about how communities come to that point of like thriving and expanding, and, you know, being based on trust.
The fundamental point about trust is that as humans, we give our trust quite easily, because it's very uneconomical to question everybody we meet and treat them with suspicion all the time. So we're very easily fooled by people who don't have our best interests at heart. But a lot of effort goes in the world in building trust. So I think corporations called it their brand, where they invest a lot into advertising, a lot of it meaningless. There isn't much information given in the advertisements, but what it is, they're saying we're investing in these advertisements because we're saying we're going to be around for a long time. We're going to give you a quality product that you can rely on, and we have the courage to do that. So a lot of trust is built in signaling publicly to everybody that we're in this for the long haul. We're in this as a community benefit. That what we're offering is for your advancement, it's not about us, it's about you. And so I think if you have a you-centered message, people will begin to trust you, so long as you're there and you're giving an indication that you're not an overnight sensation, that you're going to invest your time, your energy in if it's a local community, in whatever enterprise you're running. So, I mean, we help run a gardening charity. So you have your site, you have your growth sites. You got the various beds where you plant your vegetables or whatever, and you have an ongoing enterprise. Occasionally it crashes, but on the whole, it's giving out the right kind of signals, really.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I like the fact that you talked about the long term, because Yazan, you were talking about creating that brand. And when you're thinking about brand, you have to think long term, don't you?
Yes, of course, it has to be long term, and because I'm thinking of leaving Egypt, so it shouldn't be connected to a specific place. So that idea or that brand should be long term planned, and also not connected to any place. To make it just international, just anybody can connect through. Like simply these sessions we have, it's like we're just talking about these things. So all of us, like, we're in different countries and different cities, so the same concept, you can like take it from any country to another country just to spread these things.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Emma, with you like focus so much on your PhD and writing your autoethnography for that, do you feel like sometimes that trust entails merging that ourselves and the other? Do you sometimes find that it's more difficult to trust those that we consider to be different to us, and easier to trust those that we feel are familiar in some way? I mean, that it seems kind of obvious. It seems as though people tend to trust those are familiar. Do you believe that is true in your experience? Is it obvious, or is it just a myth that we trust those are familiar to us?
I don't know. I think it depends on the whole context and everything like that. Because some people live in communities where they can't trust the neighbour, but they can trust someone, a stranger who's. I've got very good neighbours, by the way. I'm not saying that, but some people do have bad neighbours, literally, and yet some. And then a stranger can come in their life, and within 5 minutes they know they're legit, but they might not be fully. But you get these vibes sometimes, and I think sometimes it is about vibes as well, but as well the consistency and time. But I think we're living in an age as well now where digital media, journalism is the way to go for that impact and engagement. And I know that sometimes you can see things online which might not be the truth. There's a lot of digital creators out there who outly say, this isn't my real life, I'm keeping up a image, to give to the public. So I get that, but I think there is this very strong place for media in getting a story out there, and different creative means. But I don't know, because it's a difficult one, because like I can read a book and think, oh yeah, they seem really trustworthy, and I see them on TV, and oh yeah, they're really trustworthy, but they might not be, or it might, and in some cases people have known someone for like 50 years, and lived with them, and they've ended up being a mass murderer. I was watching a program the other day about it, so sometimes we can know someone, we think we know them and trust them, and they're not. Sometimes they're hiding stuff, or the other way around. So it's very difficult, I think, that. And it depends, because in academia the narrative is told much more different than in like creative books and journalism and stuff like that. And I've discussed that as in depth, because in academia it's almost like you're hiding yourself a lot. Like, so even autoethnography, which is a research method about like the personal story, you end up not talking about the personal story. You end up talking about a theory or something else much more, and your own story gets blurred. And sometimes that's, I mean, I'm not saying it's all got to be about yourself, because and all that, but to get an issue out there, you do need to incorporate yourself so that others can sort of hear your story. So then it does make it a bit easier for them to talk about their story as well. But you've got to balance it a bit as well with that. Like, so it's very difficult.
Sorry, Ala, you had something to say about?
Yeah, I just wanted, can you remind me of your original question, just so I can make sure that I'm kind of discussing the original point?
Yeah, so the question was about trustworthiness and the familiarity, because very often, and I was just asking Emma, is this a myth, or is that, in your lived experience, do you agree with it? The general kind of consensus is that we trust those that are more familiar to us, and we mistrust those who are very different to us, who we think they are the other. What do you think, Ala?
I definitely think that, as children growing up, you are you kind of see in the media and films and TV shows, you have certain characters that are portrayed as being bad people. And I'm going to speak very loosely here, but maybe people with tattoos, or maybe people that are dressed in a particular way. And growing up, you're like, okay, you kind of attribute those characteristics to something that is maybe less trustworthy or more risky. And I think as you start to grow up a bit more, you start to I think just subconsciously you weigh up risks. So if you're in a context of let me think, a good example is maybe let's say you're somewhere in America and you see this biker gang coming in. They're big burly men with beards and tattoos. Naturally, I think because of the way that media portrays those type of people, the way you're going to weigh up the risk, because okay, they're probably not going to be people that I want to be around. But I think there's plenty of examples and situations that show that okay, maybe those bikers are actually really good people. And like Emma was saying, it really depends on actually spending time with people and actually trying to see what they're really like. I think the main point is you really need to kind of give people a little bit of time to really show you who they are. I think stereotyping and kind of judging a book by its covers is always going to be, not always, but I think in the majority of cases, it's never really going to be the right answer for you. But to kind of answer your question, I don't think it's a myth that people judge books by their cover. I don't think it's a myth that people look at certain types of people and say, okay, this is I kind of want to stay away from this. I definitely think it's true. I definitely know I've done that in the past, and when I've been on holiday in places that aren't familiar to me, I kind of naturally try to weigh up the risks, and I say, okay, that's maybe a bit more dangerous than I'd like to kind of put myself or my family through. So I try to stay away from those people or that area. So I definitely don't think it's a myth, but there's a lot more nuance to it than just a yes or no answer, I think.
Yeah, and also Emma talked about vibes. Like when we are speaking, I know you personally, and I know Chris personally, and but the others, it's like I've only met online. And so is it possible to establish that kind of trust when you can't actually feel the vibes, like those nonverbal cues that you feel when somebody is physically present with you? So Emma, you have your hand raised again. Is that something else that you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, and as well, it's not just trust with people. There's like a lot of mistrust. Well, from a disability perspective, in the disability community, there's a lot of mistrust with organisations. We've just come in England. We've come from a Conservative government, and now we're Labour. But when we were in Conservative for a number of years, they'd done a lot of austerity cuts, which affected a lot of disabled people, and the bureaucracy involved with just trying to get the like basics, you know, and stuff is such a minefield. It's unbelievable. And I mean, there's, you know, whether that's going to change with the new Labour government, there is a hope and everything like that. But I think with organisations, there's a lot of mistrust, like, and we don't know what to believe anymore as well. With stuff coming in online, what do we believe and not? But mainly it's like from a lot of large organisations rather than individuals. I think a lot of individuals do have the best intentions, you know. There's a very few out there who hit the headlines for, you know, for mass murder, but that's very rare. Most people do have genuine intentions, but I trust actually, like, a person who looks stereotypical, like, or they look a bit dodgy, but I trust them more than I would do, say, trying to get a form done with a person who replies saying, oh, you're not eligible for this. They say all the right things, they're polite, but the way it comes, I don't know. It's so I think there's a lot of mistrust against organisations as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Mohammed, are you still there? Because I was just going to ask you how this is relevant to where you are, because Mohammed has obviously been disrupted so many times, you know, in being displaced so many times. And I was wondering how you manage to trust people who are unfamiliar to you. You know, they even though people are like the same ethnic group, we don't know them. When we don't know people, we're in a totally different environment to our home, to our family home. How do you manage to build up this trust again and again and again with people?
Yes, actually, for this, to be honest with you, it's not easy at all. Every time we have to evacuate, of course, we will meet a new people with a new culture, a new background. So, and we have to deal with them, to talk with them. So, if I can say, the situation force us to deal with them, and then force us to trust even a little bit, to have a trust between each other. But you know, like, with the time, we know each other more and more, so we can decide how much we can trust, and who exactly we can trust more, and who exactly we cannot trust in. So it's not easy to trust in people, but the situation make us have to trust. So we can start with a small trust, if I can say. This will make me know if I can trust this person or not. But in general, should be a trust. There is like, we had to. The situation forced us to trust. It's not easy, and it's dangerous, because if we trust in a wrong person, maybe this will make us face problems, especially in this bad situation, bad time. So, but in the end, as I said, it's something we have to face and deal with it.
That's right. And I think 2 weeks ago you were saying that it's equally hard to be trustworthy, because not only do you have to trust them, they have to trust you, right? So it's about being trustworthy as well.
Yes,
How do you
yes,
create
exactly.
trustworthiness?
Yes.
Yeah. Alan, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. And I just kind of wanted to say, yeah, following on from what Mohammed was saying, is that I think there needs to be, you know, you could be, let's say you're put in a room with somebody who's stereotypically someone that you would say is dangerous, or maybe is not somebody that you would trust on the get-go. But I think for you to be able to start that kind of trust process, there needs to be something that you that kind of gives you an indication of this person, you know, maybe thinks in the same way that you do, or maybe has similar issues to you, or maybe has a relatively similar mentality. Like if we think about you know, Gaza and Israel, there might be somebody in Gaza who's a Palestinian, and you don't really know whether you should trust them or not. Maybe they're just kind of looking out for their own family survival. But I think, you know, you both have a common, you know, enemy, I should say, in Israel. There's a level of trust that between yourselves that you're both kind of working together against this enemy. So there is a level of trust there, although, you know, maybe a minimal amount of trust, but there's a level of trust there that allows you to maybe begin a relationship that will bring on more trust in the future. And yeah, it's those little things. Like I said, there's loads of nuance to this. It's not just like a one size fits all thing. But yeah, I'll leave it there.
Yes, Ella, you made an important point there about, you know, who we consider to be the enemy. Sometimes there are people in the enemy that are more trustworthy than people in our own group. And the reason I say that is because I read a book called The Man's Search for Meaning. It was written by somebody who's a Holocaust survivor, and he was a psychotherapist, and Man's Search for Meaning, I think it's called. And he tells the story about like the Nazis and the Jews that he was with, and some of the Jews that he was with in that concentration camp, he couldn't trust them. You know, they were the ones who would steal your food, you know, so they were of the same ethnic, in the same kind of group, but they would steal your food, they would kind of like tell tales on you and whatever. Whereas there were some Nazis who were very kind. So you see, it's not always black and white, that the enemy has to be mistrusted and your own group, you know, you can trust everyone. You can't trust everybody, because the things like war bring out the best and the worst in people, and the war brings out the best and the worst, and sometimes that, you know, the best and the worst on both sides, you know. So that was kind of like a personal account, I suppose, in a way, and other autoethnography of somebody's experience in that, you know, in those horrific circumstances. Yazin, you had your hand raised.
Okay, so first of all, like I want to thank Ala for this important point. Of course, in Gaza we have like not only one factor, but we have some factors. We have both sides. So mainly we have one enemy. We are fighting for or against this enemy. So people in Gaza, they are connected, or they are together against this enemy. So of course, like we are in a community with common things, like we are all Muslims. We're almost like majority of Muslims. We are all Arabs. We're all almost the majority Arab. The majority also, they are displaced people. So people feel each other. So of course they will help each other. So in Gaza, as I said, Gaza also is small. So people generally know each other, know the families, know who's good person and who's bad person, and also they seek to just evacuate together. So for example, Muhammad and his family, when they evacuated from their home, they came to our home, which is his aunt's home. So there's trust because we are family. When we evacuated next time, we went to like our relatives' home, so we know them. So we seek to just evacuate with trust people. We have trust before the war also. That's the first factor. The second factor, of course, because this war is happening in Gaza, and there's a lot of messy things. We're like in a jungle, so you may find some small groups that they are they're wanting to steal, they're wanting to hurt people to get anything they can get. But of course, this is like just a small group, because as we said, as a community in Gaza, they are so connected to each other.
Yeah, yes, and thank you. And Nazreen, let me bring you in, if you're still there, Nazreen.
I am still here.
So again, yeah, so we're talking about trust and about who can we trust and who are we trustworthy for, and especially in the context of a crisis. You know, in a crisis, people in all kind of, I find that even getting on the bus, you know, when the bus comes and it's all full, nobody will make room for you. Whereas if the bus is empty, people will say after you. You know, it's human nature, isn't it? So for you, what's your take on this whole concept of empathy and trust? Because, you know, it's not just simply like, oh, we trust each other because we're the same religion. We trust each other because we're from the same planet. Also creates trust, doesn't it? So I'll just kind of give you a few seconds just to say something to end the call then, Chris, before I go back to Mohammed and Yazan.
Oh, okay. And I was reflecting during the conversations on academia. I mean, I'm not an academic. Of the huge effort that universities and colleges go out of their way to legitimize their message, so that they build trust through your qualifications and the barriers and hoops they make you jump through in order to qualify to be part of that particular university and be part of universities in general. So that there is a ritual that you go through in order that we, the lay public, will trust what you say, because you've tested it in through argument and through evidence and through peer review. You don't recognize this aspect of the university building trust, building its brand, and maybe a separate discussion on how and why universities have a role to play in making things authentic, legitimate, and trustworthy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Chris. Yazan, just final comment before we close.
Yeah, I want to mention like a small thing, that now Lebanon is facing also the same war that Gaza is facing now. So within 3 days, there are more than 500 people were killed in Lebanon. So I think everybody should be like reading and just getting to know more information about what is happening now in Lebanon. And if we can get anybody from Lebanon to join us next session, that would be great, inshallah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Yazan. Mohammed, just to finish.
Yes, I want to actually in the end thank you, all of you, about this great time. Also, I want to mention what Yazan said. It will be great if we have a guest from Lebanon in our next webinar.
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. So in 2 weeks' time, I'll see who there is in my network from Lebanon, and yes, it would be great to have more and more people who, you know, all we can do is be present in this. It's like, you know, just simply the presence. You know, hopefully, there is power in us being present together in this. I'll see everybody in 2 weeks' time.
Sure. Thank